Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. This channel is all about the sports car lifestyle with Lotus sports cars in particular, but everyone is welcome here. So if that sounds like you, make sure to hit that subscribe button and click the notification bell so that you don't miss any future videos. Today I wanted to talk about the newly announced Porsche 718T, both Boxster and Cayman. The tagline for the new 718T is reduced to maximum driving pleasure. I think this is something that really speaks to those of us who are interested in pure driving experiences that cars like the Lotus Elise also offer. The 718T is really all about stripping away all the things that you don't need. It's not about necessarily brute force and power. The GTS models still have quite a bit more power, and the 718T, interestingly, is only available with the base engine. So this is not a brute force powerful sports car, but rather Porsche in their press release states that the 718T will be most at home on winding country roads, offering the joy of dynamic driving as its ultimate goal. The two-seater accommodates this philosophy through a pared-down range of features. So it's a really interesting car. In a way, it sort of does what the GTS models have done in the upper range, as far as including a lot of common features and upgrades and putting them all in one package and selling it as a trim level at a slightly reduced cost to what it would cost to have all of these options selected individually. This is sort of a GTS light in a way. It has bigger wheels, it has a lowered suspension, but it does things like removing the infotainment system, replacing the door handles with door pulls like you might see in a GT3. You get the GT steering wheel. So I think it's an interesting move, and I think it's something that is targeted at people who like, really raw, pure sports cars and roadsters. And one thing that Porsche does extremely well is it makes these cars that are super fun to drive, really responsive and dynamic, but they're also very usable. And I think usability is probably the key difference between cars like this and cars, say, from the Lotus family. And I'll use the Elise as an example. When I first started shopping for a sports car, I could not ignore the Boxster and the Cayman. And before I had driven either of the cars, I would have expected them to be, of similar size and probably similar comfort and a similar overall driving experience. But now that I have driven both, the Porsche really is in a completely different class than the Lotus, and that can be good or bad depending on what you want out of this car. The sports car segment is such an interesting one, considering, in no other segment could you have two cars that are sort of direct competitors attempting to do the same thing where one of them weighs 50% more. And that's the case here with the 718T versus the Lotus Elise. None of these cars are huge. The Boxster's not huge, the Cayman's not huge, neither is the Elise. But they seem like, given their sort of, raison d'etre, that they ought to be, similar. Now, I haven't driven the 718T, but I have been in the 718 Cayman. And I think what's striking about it is that even though this is a stripped-down sports car, just how much more stuff there is in a Boxster or a Cayman over a Lotus. If you look at side-by-side pictures, you see two interiors. They look fairly normally appointed until you start looking really close, and you see that, the Elise looks like a car with an interior, sort of, in photographs, and then when you actually sit in one, you realize that the door cards are like paper-thin wafers. And when you sit down into the interior of a Porsche, the interior feels substantial. It feels very well put together. All of the materials are extremely high quality. While these cars seem like they're sort of in the same class, and in this particular circumstance, Porsche is sort of going after this segment that is really all about purity and escaping and having a one-to-one sort of adventure with your vehicle. But they're not taking it anywhere near as far as something like a Lotus. And while I don't think that Porsche is necessarily trying to delude anyone into thinking that they are, I think the buying public, on the other hand, sees these two cars, considers them together, and thinks that they're relatively similar. And while the specs are similar, the 718T, for example, will do 0 to 60 in about 4.7 seconds, which is very close to what the Elise 111Rs do. The new Elise, say Sprint 220, is even faster, around 4.1 seconds. The Evora does 0 to 60 in about 4.1 seconds and weighs just slightly more than the 718T. And I find the Boxster and the Cayman both very appealing. In fact, I love the way they look. I think they drive beautifully. They sound great. It's very impressive that Porsche is able to build a car that's sort of in the spirit of the Lotus Elise, weighs 50% more and still handles great, looks great, and doesn't seem like a huge car. But in a lot of ways, things like removing the infotainment, but we'll put it back for free if you want it, and nylon door pulls are cool. I'd love to have nylon door pulls. Whereas Lotus are willing to go all the way and give you a car with no carpet, no armrest, no glove box. You still get a couple of airbags. When I look at the Porsche press materials and the commercial they created for the 718T, it's about the driving experience and purity on twisty roads and then getting out and breathing. And I think that's a pretty awesome thing that a car maker is trying to do. These are not things that we need to have, but they're great things and great things to enjoy. And I think the Lotus Elise does the same thing. It doesn't do it as comfortably. So in a way, for certain people, the Porsche is going to win. It's possible to go on twisty roads and still be in a car that's, has some semblance of comfort. Whereas with the Lotus, you throw away all comfort in exchange for getting a more visceral feel. To me, that feels more alive than what it feels like to be in one of these Porsches. But you still feel alive in both of them. You're not trading that feeling of freedom by choosing one over the other. In my view, there's nothing like being behind the cockpit of the Elise because it feels like you're behind the cockpit of a race car. The Porsche doesn't feel that way, but it feels great. I'd love to have something like a Cayman or a Boxster to go along with my Lotus. There are just certain times where it would be preferable to take something like a Cayman on a short trip. My problem is that realistically, I may be able to add a few more cars to my fleet at some point. Even I think of these cars as being in the same class. And so the next thing I need is not another two-seat roadster, even though the Porsche would have significantly better storage space and overall usability. Once again, if videos like this are something you like, make sure to hit that like button and that subscribe button so you don't miss any future videos. I want to branch out a bit and cover sports car topics that will be of interest to people who already like my existing Lotus content and not go too far into the general realm of automotive content, but stay sort of focused on things that I think will be of interest to people who are drawn to what it is to want to be one with your machine and what that feels like. And that's what interests you about driving. It's not necessarily, pure power or any one particular thing, but rather it's that feeling that's hard to describe, but there are moments where you are with the car and everything is gelling just right, for which there's really no substitute, and it's priceless. And so that's really what this channel is all about, and just spreading that message and experience and helping people get there. So if that's something that interests you, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And once again, just so my wife will let me keep making these videos and buying sports cars. Anyhow, thank you for watching.